you're going to see those people start to peel off because honestly, you can make way more money as a freelance, or at least in my experience, I do a lot better as a freelance employee of an agency than I ever did working in agency. I can do double my salary.
This is the Today's Agency podcast. I'm Shawn Butler, your host, marketing professor, growth consultant, and 3-time agency founder. And today, I'm sitting down for a virtual conversation with Ryan Roghaar, a graphic designer by trade who has been relentless in developing his skills and pursuing his passions for all things digital and innovation. And that's what we're covering in this episode. We'll be talking about how we, as entrepreneurs and small business owners, have had a front row seat to seeing the game completely change as far as working with business clients and how we think it will continue to evolve. Now, Ryan, you'll hear me call you Rogue out of habit, and because it's an awesome nickname, is uniquely qualified to comment on the state of the industry. He worked with agencies for over 10 years from both the inside and out, and he's an innovator at the forefront of the remote work movement as founder of Teammate Apart, an org whose mission is to help those working remotely and those who hire them to work together better. I love that. He's also a podcaster, which is good. One of us should be. He's a YouTube personality. He's an agency owner, a freelance designer, and one of the few guys I personally know who seems to get NFTs, crypto, the whole Web3 thing. So yeah, he's got his finger on the pulse of where marketing agency work is going. Good morning, Ryan. Great to have you here.
First of all, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Sure.
I mean, what's so fun about this sort of rekindling or this reconnection, and I'll keep this short, but Shawn and I knew each other working in an agency years ago. I mean, out here in Salt Lake City, actually, I'm based in Salt Lake at this point. And we worked together in that agency. We had projects that crossed paths, that sort of thing. And we got to know each other a little bit. Eventually, Shawn split and he went and did a number of really exciting things and moved across the country. But through random happenstance and the fact that I was just trying to get a mailing list up and running, he happened to be on it and ended up catching a couple of emails. So we were able to kind of rekindle that connection and kick things off again. And I'm excited to be a part of your show.
Awesome. Again, love having you here. Love that you bring some expertise to this topic. And I think that's where we want to kick off, right? You want to start with kind of your relationship with agencies as it's changed and how that plays into what you do today.
Sure. So, I mean, first things first, I'm an agency owner, and my agency was born out of I guess what I would call a very successful freelance career. So I began life, or what I started with was a creative agency in name. However, I lived in a small town and I'd never set foot in an agency. So at some point I had the idea to contact about 20, 25 agencies within about 3 hours of my home in sunny Pocatello, Idaho, and see if any agency would allow me to be a fly on the wall in their spot to learn a little about the agency business. And in exchange, I would trade them out a month of free design work. So let me design for free in exchange for sitting on your wall.
Can I ask how many agencies are in the Pocatello metro area?
I believe there's one presently. There's a handful of little shops, and this one shop is kind of a good old boys club. I don't want to talk bad about them or whatever, but they know everybody. They've got all the big contracts. There's no more room for little fish. And in fact, a lot of agencies have started, or a lot of companies have started to outsource to agencies outside of Pocatello because there just isn't anybody in town. Back when I was there, I think there was one. And, again, it was sort of a niche group of guys that worked for the companies with friends, that kind of thing. So it wasn't like what I would consider a big agency. So from Pocatello, I was looking at the nearest major markets or semi-major markets, which was Boise, Idaho, and Salt Lake City, Utah. I reached out to a combined maybe 22, 24 agencies. The only agency that took me up on it was a company called Thomas Art Stone, Farmington, Utah, who I actually ended up moving to Utah to go to work for. And I came down, I gave them my month of time for free. They let me sit in their meetings, be a part of a team, all that kind of stuff. I was probably, I guess I must have been like 24, 25 at the time. And
Sure.
And so I came down and did that, maybe a little older actually. But anyway, I came down, I did that. And then we shook hands, we had a great time, we parted ways. 2 years later, a guy left Thomas Arts, and they hired me to come in and as his replacement, or offered me a position. And I actually got an offer in Boise, Idaho, the same day that I got my offer in Salt Lake. And I ended up going the Salt Lake way. So anyway, so that was a great opportunity. I got my first foot inside a real agency. I continued to run my freelance operation, which was, my creative agency, quote unquote. And while I worked for them, right? So I was working, I worked for them as a full-time staff employee for about 3.5 years. And I worked, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for them, and then 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. for me. And I did that basically every day for, 3.5, 4 years. And then after 3 years, as happens in the agency business, I was laid off. And I became suddenly this agency, Thomas Arts, one of their top freelance guys. So, we moved from a relationship where I was working for the company to becoming one of their most trusted freelance guys. And
it just undermines the point I often make, which is there's no such thing as job security. People think they get a job at an agency in New York or a job at Boeing in Seattle, and you're working day to day, no matter when your productivity reviews are. If you're doing 90-day reviews or you're doing day-to-day reviews, you're working at the mercy of somebody else making those decisions.
Yeah, no, and I think that's right. And unfortunately, for me, I didn't get laid off, but fortunately, I became great friends with the people at the agency, and that's turned into a very fruitful freelance career.
Very cool.
That basically allowed me to survive for years, and since then, obviously, we do a lot of work for a lot of other people. But all these years later, we still do work for them.
Well, I want to talk a little about that relationship. So my real question, again, for our focus today is how the marketing world is changing. And you do a lot of work with the freelance or the outsourced marketing resource.
Yeah. So there's sort of two different sides of our life, right? So my agency, R2, is what we call a virtual agency, which is basically we have a core group of individuals at the center, and then we leverage freelance or outsourced resources for the odds and ends, right? So we don't necessarily have a web development team in-house, but what we do have is UI, creative direction, copywriting, things like that. And then we'll outsource the dev team, and we just happen to have the expertise to be able to manage a good quality dev team. So we can do that, right? But we sort of equate our roster of talent sort of to like baseball cards, right? So if you come on and you're working with us, we can, you come to me, you say, hey, Ryan, I want to do a commercial. Okay, cool. So now we're going to bring in a videographer, a director of photography, a light guy, sound guy, whatever we need. And then at the end of that engagement, once commercial shot, well, now we don't need all those guys anymore. So we trade those cards back in. And then we pull out a new deck of cards for the new set of guys. Right now, I need an art director. I need a graphic designer. I need a copywriter. I need a social media manager. Now we can promote our commercial, right? And so the idea is that we're this sort of team that ebbs and flows, right? So that's sort of our makeup, and that ability and sort of that broad network of really high level professionals that we leverage in our work gives us sort of the pulse of what's going on in the freelance and sort of remote worlds. On the other side, we're working for a lot of sort of traditional agencies, right? So we're working for agencies that keep everybody under one roof, right? So they have a video team and a social team and a design team and an art direction or a copywriting team or whatever they've got under their one roof, right? And so those guys get into pickles sometimes, and I'm sure most agency owners will know this, where basically all their resources are sort of allocated, right? It's the old contractor's wife thing, right? Like sometimes you just can't get to your own stuff, right? Because you're busy doing everybody else's. And I know plenty of agencies that struggle to get their own internal website done, for example, because they're busy building everybody else's stuff, right? So sometimes we'll come in as almost like special forces for those, one-off projects and things like that. And because we're a self-contained team, even though we're a small agency, if they have an account that either they don't have the bandwidth to cover, maybe they don't have the interest in really focusing a lot of energy on it, but they still want to take the account. Maybe it's somewhere near the edge of a minimum level engagement or something, and they don't want to pay, they're not quite paying enough to be a full agency client, but maybe they're worth developing. We'll come in for those situations and basically be able to white label our service, as their service. So we can come in as a team to do all the agency stuff without having to actually be a part of the agency.
Can I take you to 30,000 feet with that? Just as a trend, do you see more of that happening in the industry? I mean, I think there'll always be people who are going for WPP, Omnicom, like Publicis. There's always going to be the Pepsi Colas of the world, the Home Depots that are going to hire the top agency thing. But tell me how the rest of that landscape looks from your point of view.
Yeah, my take, and take it for what it's worth. It could be right, it could be wrong. I think that there's always going to be a strong gig economy, and you're going to see it grow. But I think what you're going to start to see is people that are your top performers, your high level guys, are going to either take that really high level position in agency. But as they age and they get a little older and they decide they don't want to be behind the computer 18 hours a day or whatever it is that you're being driven to do, in sort of traditional agency culture, you're going to see those people start to peel off, because honestly, you can make way more money as a freelance. Or at least in my experience, I do a lot better as a freelance employee of an agency than I ever did working in agency. So for me, there's a little more to it. You've got to market yourself. You've got kind of a business to build. You've got, pay your own taxes, all this kind of stuff, right? So it's kind of a pain in the butt, but I can do double my salary. Right. And so, so it's worth the headache. You know what I mean? And
now, is that through one agency? When you're saying double your salary, are you also talking multiple streams of income? You're able to leverage your work hours?
Well, so this is part of it too, right? I'm not tied up in an agency 14 hours a day, right? I'm not tied up on client work. I'm not working weekends to cover their things, right? I
want to hear this. Yeah.
As the freelancer, or as the expert that is hired to come in and help these agencies, I'm able to then sort of manage my own calendar to some extent, right? They have deadlines and sometimes I have to meet their deadlines, but I very rarely have to work weekends. I very rarely will take a project that's short term, and I have some of those liberties that I wouldn't have if I worked in an agency, right? So for higher level performers, this stuff's pretty attractive. And especially right now, as you're going through this real, sort of downturn and you've got big agencies laying off and things like that, they're not necessarily laying off top talent, but now's a good time to do some of that shuffling, right? And basically every time I've started a business, it's been sort of fruit of a layoff. I was already working for myself when I went to work for the agency that eventually laid me off. But the way that we were able to level up and the way that we've grown over the last several years has all been as a result of being laid off. It's very easy to be complacent when you work in agency and just do the work, or be exhausted because you're being asked to do a lot. And when you freelance or when you break out of that, you can do a lot more. So back to your question about this idea of where's the general industry going, I think you're always going to have people that think there's job security in agency. I think I think as we've discussed, that's not a reality probably for most places, and we're sort of in a society now where people jump around every couple of years anyway. It's just sort of the way people do it now, right? I mean, I'm a little older. So for me, I was always the guy that, if they hadn't laid me off, I'd still be there today.
I love that you're a little older, because you're saying older than the freelancers or the gig economy you work with. I think you and I are born within a few months of each other, Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, there's definitely going to be a younger take to this, right? I mean, so this is obviously my idea of how it works. I hire a lot of people who are younger and stuff just because they're the ones that are up and coming, and they're the ones that have the energy, and they're the ones that do the kind of work we need. And so I see some of it, and it is different. But I mean, even when I was in agency, I was on the cusp of people who were leaving every couple of years anyway, or trading to a new agency for a bump in title, or, whatever, because there's so much around that. And so much in advertising, I think, is ego driven. And I fall into this even every now and then, which is like, well, maybe I'd go back to work, and maybe I could get a gig at like Publicis or something, and, land one of these big agency jobs with a big title so that I could tell all my friends, and then look at my LinkedIn profile and look at all those acronyms. Like, I mean, it's just, and I know guys like that.
But what if it happened? Let's play the game. So you do get that job. Publicis calls, they tell you they want you to head the office in Pocatello. What do you really see happening there, Ryan?
Yeah, for me, I think ultimately it just doesn't work. I think sometimes I think I want it to, but what I think will happen, and this is basically been my trend, is that I go into a job, then I sort of forget all the stuff that I had going, right? Because I get busy, I get wrapped up in the work I'm doing, I appreciate the steady pay, and now I have this obligation to an employer, right? I need to do my best for them, and if I'm really going to leverage my experience with that company, I need to take advantage, right? I need to get, go full blast and give them all I can give.
You have to do that, and I lived the same thing. I wasn't joking about 90-day profitability reports. The hardest part about agency for me was the billing in 15-minute increments, reporting your day and your week with 40% profitability. We were expected to have, as a director, I was expected to have 60, but when I was a true social, like a subject matter expert, I was supposed to have 70% profitability billed to clients weekly, 40 hours. So to bill 40 hours, I had to work 60 or 70 hours a week. And it literally was, what have you done for me lately? Every time I came into my profitability reports. So again, am I productive? Sure. But do I want someone else dictating how I spend the 12, 14, 18 hours of my day? That's a trade-off that I repeatedly decided I was not going to make.
Yeah, well, it's right. And I think, and this is obviously a generalization about agency culture, but at least for a hot minute there was this real trend of, let's bring in the ping pong table. Let's, stock the kitchen. Let's make sure that we have every version of something as long as it's got caffeine in it, right? So we've got a drink, we've got a Coke, we've got an energy bar, we've got a whatever.
Xbox.
Even the carrots have been infused with, whatever. It's like, but the idea is really not to make your work experience better, but to keep you at work.
I hope you gained some new insights and got as much out of today's podcast as I did. I want to give a last big thank you to Ryan Roghaar with Teammate Apart. Great to have your take on all this, Rogue. Really good to see you again here. How can they best find you and keep up with all the stuff that you're putting out?
Sure. The agency, like I mentioned, is called R2. The website's just r2mg.com. That's M as in media, G as in group.com, r2mg.com. So you can just go to rogha.ar, and all my links are there, to the NFT projects, to the podcasts, to the remote work stuff, to everything. You can just find it all there.
Absolutely. We'll follow up with you. Please, everyone, take time to leave a review. Tell us what you learned today. Help us out so we can build our community of high growth entrepreneurs and agency owners. If you'd like to connect with me, go to relevantforagencies.com or todaysagency.com. Connect on Facebook, Instagram, over on LinkedIn. And remember, you own the business you built. Don't let it be the other way around.